Be live in 3, 2, 1. Okay, we actually live, which is good. Okay, Nikita might be joining, and let me start the recording in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. And hello everyone. Oh, I missed that sound. Dane, have you missed it? Tell me.
It's been almost a year.
Yes, almost exactly a year. Last one we actually published on October 9. We got quite a few folks who listened to it, but we had several surprises. First of all, the first surprise, we are back again. Second surprise, we actually have way more people now, and today we at least have our third permanent co-host, because this is one episode of the new season, and so far you've been on 100% of new episodes of the new seasons. So yes, say hi to everyone.
Hey, I'm Eli. I'm happy to be here. Really excited to be part of the podcast. I gave a couple listens to the previous podcast and just looking forward to talking to everybody.
Yeah, and yes. So welcome to the show. So I want to remind.
I wonder how many folks are gonna be like surprised to see a new episode just pop up on their phones. Like we don't unsubscribe from podcasts once they go away. They just disappear out of your feed.
Oh yeah, and we didn't do any announcement. I wanted to stay quiet just to do pilot, so it's actually going to be complete out of the blue. Like no one was notified about anything. For the next one though, we're going to publish as usual. It will be a particular time, particular venue, so people can wait, can ask live questions. But yes, for now it's literally out of the blue. Yes. So since we've been out for almost a year, let's remind everyone, because there might be people who are listening for the first time, what the concept of the show. And we started doing that quite some time ago, because we both, there was more than two of us at the beginning, had the same problem. Each of us has many topics that we're interested in. Investing, maybe gaming, Python, machine learning, deep learning, so many different topics. And we end up realizing that each of us actually have too many different sources, like podcasts or even books or magazines, that we're trying to consume to stay up to date with everything. And that was not sustainable. So we start looking at different means of consuming the news and updates in different sources. We realized that it would be nice to have a show where hosts would be talking about anything they want. And if we are like-minded, we effectively will be consuming all the news from them and maybe sharing back our news. There was not that many shows that would fit that narrative, and as usually, if you want to do something well, you need to do it yourself. So we decided to start it. So that's effectively the show for people who finding what we're speaking about interesting and related to them. And if you would not like anything that we speak about here, you're just not our audience. Go to another podcast. Don't come back ever. That's TLDR.
And or wait for another host.
Or wait for another host. Yes. Yes. And we already have quite a few people who want to participate and will be eventually joining during the duration of the next month or so. And we have rotation host. Host is effectively someone who comes to the show, prepared with the topic, and then we're discussing in completely open fashion anything we want. So that is a TLDR, just to remind listeners who we are, why we're doing so, and so on. It just happened that this annoying voice that you experience right now is the first host on our show, so I will be driving the topics today. But before I'm going to start throwing the topics to your ears, folks, do you want to say anything? Anything you want. Okay. Wait. There was... Jesus, let me show it to you. I haven't used it for a year. So this was a special white paper that I used with a tag name on each button of the sounds, and it's so old that there is no text in here anymore. I wanted to play some sound right now, but I cannot find any of it. Anyway.
Improvements for the next podcast.
Yes. I need to refresh it.
Next time you use a Sharpie.
Yes. Okay, so the first thing first, I found this interesting book that one of the people that I know is working on to publish. It's a GitHub book. It calls The IPI, that is in progress of making by Sergey Konstantinov. This is a guy who actually implemented many APIs in his life. So effectively, he has tons of the interesting background knowledge on the APIs. The only problem with this specific book that I want to warn you about, he is very opinionated. So to some extent, it's like if you want to build a CI/CD for deep learning, you come to a line, you do whatever he tells you to do, respectively if he has any reasons why you should be doing or he's saying to do so. So this guy is also the guy that just telling how to do things without explaining why you need to do it the way you do. But because of the experience that the person possesses, you should probably be listening to that person, respectively of what the person is saying. So that's the biggest con of this book, because there is not that many background. He would be saying, do API this way, not that way, without diving too much in the question why. Go for it.
Yeah, I feel like that's like an interesting point in terms of like when you become an expert in a certain field. At a certain point, I feel like if you don't teach people or you don't mentor people that are, a little more junior to you, you kind of lose sight of how to actually justify things. And it's kind of that innovator's dilemma, right? Where you constantly innovate at the very beginning of your career, you constantly build up these ideas, these theorems of how things should work. And at a certain point in your career, you kind of go over the hill, and those ideas might not be the cutting edge anymore. They might not be the things that you see anymore. You might be the subject matter expert, but at the end of the day, like the technologies have kind of like passed you by. And I mean, I think it's an interesting thing. I'm sure the book is great. I really want to read it. I'm really interested in how people structure APIs, especially around like, how do you translate that to like CLI usage, or how do you translate that to other types of technologies? So, but yeah, it's just an interesting way of viewing the innovator's dilemma through like a technologist kind of point of view.
Yeah, and like these kind of things, like we're getting best practices from experts. They're great because like you're learning all this like cool new stuff. But it can be hard to really appreciate why these things are so good unless you've already been through the roll through the mud and like had to wrestle with all these things in the past. And like that's when you've dealt with the problems, and you kind of see these things. You realize, okay, hey, this is why this stuff is so amazing. Otherwise, like if you're just kind of like blindly following these patterns, you have no idea like what the context was in which these were actually good patterns, and when it's time to leave them aside and like go on to something else.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, I just recall I was on the other side of this archetype of person where I said that we need to do blah without being able even to answer a question why. And actually, help me here, folks. I will tell you a story, and I would love to hear how you would answer why. So I remember showing this proposal for the API. So you have an API. API expects a body, and that body is a JSON. And one of the fields of that body of the JSON is the string, and string's supposed to be a YAML inside. Like when I saw that, so like, nope, that's not going to happen. And the guy just asked me, but why? And I actually didn't know what to answer in this question, because yes, that is not something. And there was a backstory. So yes, the API by itself is JSON based, but one of the libraries that was made as a service natively consumes YAML. So that's why the guy kind of thought that it might make sense to expose that fact and pass YAML that you will be passing to that tool as a string field within the JSON. But up to this day, I'm not sure how to answer why on that specific question, like why this is not something that you should be doing ever.
I remember when you like brought this example up the first time, and like, yeah, it kind of shocking to hear you describe this happening, but like that correct answer to this was ambiguous. But I have a couple more follow-up questions now.
Okay.
The guy, when he was like generating that YAML, how was that being generated? Was it like a certain tool that was outputting YAML and he just wasn't bothering to translate it to like JSON format? Or was he actually converting it to YAML for the future YAML tools consumption?
Honestly, I don't remember. I really don't remember. It effectively took you more than 1 year to come up with follow-up question, and you want me to, to still remember.
Yeah, because it's like if you have it as a YAML, like you're almost basically saying, hey, this is just like a binary blob, effectively. And so like all the mindset of like, hey, when is it appropriate to have a binary blob in here would apply. Like you're just kind of like having a dumb pipe. You have no idea what's in here, and you're simply just passing it on.
Mm-hmm. Yes, probably something like that. But honestly, I don't remember. Okay, so let's come back to the API, that specific thing. I wanted to mention just only one thing, and out of curiosity, ask you folks about that. So the guy is trying, in the book, I randomly pick a chapter on versioning, because versioning APIs is one of the most interesting topic.
Actually, before we move on.
Sure. Go for it.
Yeah, and by the way, Eli, feel free to interrupt Slava or me at any time.
No worries.
So, fun story with Stripe. The very first version of Stripe that was like released, this is like back when there was like 4 or 6 developers over there. Like one of the Stripe's co-founders, he was really, really passionate about API design, except his ideal design was you never pass anything in the body. The entire API is managed purely through headers. If you have like a body that you would normally pass nowadays, no, you add a header, and the body is the value of one of the header items, and that is how every request should work.
Is that correct? I feel like that's not correct. I feel like, do headers scale like that? Can you add as many headers as you want?
I have no idea. Well, I mean, I think there's probably like some memory related limits, but I think it's pretty high.
Yeah, I feel like the world's kind of past that kind of design philosophy by. We're all on the JSON REST kind of stream right now. But I mean, Stripe is like almost always lauded as like extremely usable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's like one of their key things. And like I think one of the cool things about them is that they up till now they haven't deprecated an old API. So like even their very, very first API, I believe that still is functional.
Wouldn't that be expensive to maintain?
It is a pain to maintain, but that is like, and it might not, I don't know how long they'll be able to keep doing that. But up till now, they're like, okay, hey, look, if you set up an integration with Stripe, we're going to make sure that integration won't just break on its own. Whatever worked in the past is going to keep working.
Well, I hope they're charging money. They're charging extra to maintain those libraries or maintain those APIs, because it's maintaining super backwards compatible things extremely expensive.
Yeah, but like what you do, I remember back in the day when I was working the YouTube, when you have clients out there, you cannot enforce upgrade to them. At some point, you no longer can upgrade clients because some of the phones are so old that they're not receiving latest Android. And at some historical point, you will have to start dropping APIs. But at the same time, you still have significant amount of customers from that old platform that never upgraded to the latest YouTube that will start keep calling your APIs, and you have to support them.
Now I'm curious because I guess everybody have V, right? So V had a YouTube client, didn't it?
V.
What is V?
Nintendo V? Game console?
Oh,
that thing.
Yeah.
Oh, let me jump from my personal account. I just realized that I joined from our own one.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay, so this guy effectively suggests exactly that, to support all the SEMbars and never break them. So he suggests obviously to prepend with /v1 or v2, v3, yada. Now I've seen that in many cases, including Google Cloud. If you go to Google Cloud, you will see /v1 and other platforms doing so. Now, question to you folks: have any of you ever in your life seen a v3? I've seen V2 once. That was there, and once, like literally.
Yeah, in my Azure days, they had a different API versioning scheme where basically at the end of every HTTP request, you'd add an extra parameter, like an @ like Q whatever, and that parameter would say, hey, this is the API version blah, and the version will be based on the date. So every time they added like a new breaking API change, they would just update the latest versions tag. And so they had like 50 different API versions, but most of them were like fairly trivially backwards compatible with each other.
Jesus. Go ahead.
I think getting to a V3 is going to be something that's like more of a leadership and a culture based thing rather than like a technology based thing. Like it's all about investment, right? Like we build the V1s in like the early 2000s, and when leadership is like a specific age, and then they age out in the 2010s, and that's when we get our V2s, and now we're started the 2020s, and maybe the V3s will start rolling around for everybody once the leadership changes at a certain point, because it's all about investment. People don't like reinvesting if they've already invested within their career life cycles. So, you know, that investment will come later, I feel like.
True, but in many cases it comes in the shape of new product. Like usually you do V1, you're learning about your customers, you do V2 in the right way, and V3 is a new product, usually, but not always. Except obviously Microsoft. I didn't know that they have this scheme. I can imagine this. You're doing the request and the response like, dude, this is a yesterday's API. That's no longer works. Like you need to use today. And tomorrow they will change it again.
Oh my god, day versioning would be incredible.
Yes.
Per day versioning.
Yeah, and it was like a pretty neat setup that they had, because like every version API version corresponded to a class, and when they would want to make a breaking change, they would have the new class become a subclass of the old class, like inherit from the old class, and the new class would have its own definition. And like when you would use an older class's tag, it would just go back to the parent class and run the code from the parent class.
Jesus.
Are you describing GCOM from like Microsoft Oli?
Microsoft Azure's, or at least
Versioning.
one of my team's service is Microsoft Azure versioning system for the API.
Yes, that's a GCOM, right? You register interfaces. I used to be a Windows developer many years back. And yes, so you put something in the registry where there is GUID and set of calls, and yes, that's how it's supposed to be. So that's a COM interface. I forget who designed this one, but the design is pretty good, and it maps to like C++ really neatly. So this way you can like write a video game. So DirectX would be a typical example. You can say, you know, I want a DirectX version 7, 8, 9. There is a GUID for every version of DirectX. And as soon as you say you want this version, it gives you exactly the methods that correspond to this version. So like if you have an older game written with DirectX 7 or something that's still supported, presumably, that's the latest runtime.
I had the goal. Go ahead, Eli.
I was gonna say the Docker API kind of works similar to that, like where depending on the client that you use, it changes the API version or it downgrades the API version from the daemon, like the returner, which is kind of like an interesting way to go about doing API versioning.
On that note, I had a task to go to Grave without knowledge how DCOM works. And now I start learning it. Nikita, looks like thanks to you, I failed my task. I start learning how DCOM versioning works. Yes. Anyway, that was, I think, the last note before we can move to the main topic today. And Nikita already here, so we can start. But before starting that main topic, Nikita, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Nikita. I've been a developer at Meta for the last 4.5 years, and I've been doing coding mostly in C++, sometimes in kernel, for almost quarter of a century. I'm scared to say that.
And if someone of you folks ever created a pull request to the PyTorch and receive a comment, no, it's horrible, pull request never submitted, the chances are that response was coming from Nikita.
We just call that being thorough.
True. Yes. Okay, and our main topic for the day that I wanted to start is GitLab. GitLab made an amazing things. They recently have unknowns that they planning to start deleting public repositories that has no commits, no comments, or no any write activities. So it doesn't matter if like thousands of people cloning it, looks like, if nothing been pushed or nothing been changed in the repository, they announce that they would be removing it. And I don't know what is the best way for the managed Git service to shoot yourself in the foot from the perspective of customer opinions, except doing exactly this. It reminds me only one similar incident that Eli might have some context about.
A little bit.
A little bit, yes.
A little bit. So, I mean, okay. I do have some context about things that are like this. So GitLab, they're a business, right? And as businesses need to survive, they need to make business decisions. And I'm sure somebody on the accounting team was looking at the expenses for GitLab and was like, wait a second, we're spending all this money to do this thing that nobody's interacting with, and it doesn't drive our product, doesn't drive anything else like that. And it reminded me of a situation that we had when I worked at Docker. I worked at Docker for a couple of years. Previously, I did release engineering for Docker and CI/CD for their products, just in general. And where we had a situation with Hub, we were spending monstrous amounts of money for AWS storage costs for Docker Hub. And you can think about it: billions of images, petabytes of egress, all of these things. And for some of these images, they get pushed. They never get pooled, they never get interacted with, they never get updated. And so it's like, at a certain point, you're like, should we be spending hundreds of millions of dollars to support these images? Probably not. And like, I feel similarly about GitLab. I can understand the sentiment of people who consume the service to be mad about it. But at the end of the day, it's tough to run a business, and like making tough decisions like this are part of it. And I can't really fault the people at GitLab, but I think you might have a follow-up article that might kind of seem a little bit contrary to what I'm saying.
By the way, they reverted that point. They reverted that decision. Yes, I do clearly remember the Docker situation because it's impacted me personally. I still don't think it was the right move. I do understand the premises. I do understand the reasoning behind that. But to be fair, especially with Docker. The Docker is special because Docker has layering and caching. So if you have some type of worker that you are not updating a lot because it's used only internally, so you don't care about some security patches, you might be using it on thousands of machines, but you never repull it, because you have internally in-company caching, and now suddenly, even though it seems like everything working, you forgot to pull it, and the source of truth got removed without you even noticing that. That was scary, really scary.
Yeah. But I think a question to the greater group is, how far do we expect free services to go for their free users? Like, how far do we think that they need to go for free users?
That depends on the service, right? So the great example is Archive, whose entire goal is to preserve the entire internet forever. So I guess the answer here is that, if there is a situation like that, they need to collaborate with some non-profit entity that is willing to preserve. Retro computing is near and dear to me, like just as a hobby. And I know how hard it is to find a software, especially from a certain era, right? There is an interesting gap like 1970s to 1984, which kind of existed before internet, but after everything was preserved in the libraries, and software released during that period on the cassette tapes are extremely hard to find and preserve, right? And just to find any provenance, so to speak, about what the software is about. I'm not collecting actual tapes, but to say how many versions of Karateka was released on a tape, what is the original one? No one knows. Well, Karateka was released on discs, but anyway.
But Nikita, do you think if the Internet Archive was a for-profit business, would they be so forthcoming with allowing?
No. And I don't know, again, who supports them, National Archives. I know that Meta supports them. I know that Google supports archive.org. I don't know, maybe Berkeley in some capacity. But yeah, I don't know. That's a great question.
But this kind
Zane, how do you feel about free services?
Yeah, it's kind of a tricky thing because when you have services, they start off with giving away free stuff to gain those customers. But as you're doing that, you're kind of building up an implicit promise that, hey, look, we're going to be doing this for you for a long time, especially as the service becomes more established. You start trusting more and more in this implicit promise that the service will be available. And at some level, like, you can't really expect something that someone's giving you for free for their own business justification to remain free forever. But you would kind of hope and expect that they're somehow responsible in how they eventually take away this free thing one day to let you have your own option to have it. Just like that's why a lot of companies nowadays, like, even if they have, like, say, for example, a dependency on pip packages, that's all just trusting on the goodness of whoever manages the pip packages and the pip distribution stuff, that they'll all be up and running forever. So, like, companies who really have mission critical stuff, they're going to start forking their own copies of these packages and, like, making sure that those are available so that if the stuff goes down, they're not taken down with it.
Do you guys remember the story about NPM meltdown like 4 or 5 years back when one of the, I forget what package was it, but it's not just about maintaining something, but, like, no one guarantees that the stuff that somebody released will be, or Flappy Bird, another example of the same thing.
But if we come back to Eli's question that was the beginning, for how far the free software should go, looks like we are converging to the point that it should go as far as locking down users to the particular vendor so they will be ready to pay as much money as possible, because it's still going to be cheaper than migrate to something new. And while this seems reasonable for many companies, I would not name GitLab as a necessary market leader in the managed Git so they can start doing vendor locks. Migrating away from GitHub is from the GitLab is a very simple and cheap task. Actually, have any of you seen recently anyone showing you GitLab repository? Public repository in the GitLab?
Actually, interestingly enough, NVIDIA does use GitLab to build their CUDA images that get published to Docker Hub. So I have contributed recently to a GitLab repository, to be fair.
Oh, but
that's the only one. That's the only one.
Is it managed by them? Because GitLab is indeed almost de facto standard on hosted enterprise solution, or actual public GitLab that's GitHub.
Actual public GitLab.
Oh my God, this is the first story that I'm hearing, because I only saw 2 people ever showed me repository. Both of them were fanatics that was boycotting Copilot. So they didn't want to publish their repository on GitHub, and that was only two folks. Okay, interesting. I wonder why. We need to invite someone from the NVIDIA.
We know a couple people, so maybe we can have a guest from NVIDIA come on.
Okay, actually, yes, that's might be absolutely reasonable. Okay, I have two more specific thoughts.
I have a prediction.
Go.
NVIDIA uses GitLab internally, and so when they wanted to post something externally, they're like, let's just use the same tool we used internally.
Probably. Maybe they have, like, GitLab pipelines or something like that set up, and they don't want to necessarily move that. And, I mean, I've actually heard a lot of good things about GitLab pipelines. When we were evaluating our move to GitHub Actions for PyTorch, GitLab was one of the ones that I seriously considered as well. But, obviously GitHub Actions went out, and we were pretty happy with it.
In terms of permissions, GitLab is so much ahead of GitHub, right? Like, I mean, I never use them, but reading the documentation, theoretically, GitLab gives developer community much more control about how they want to structure the project, right? And again, like, branch permissions, merge rules, all of that is much more controllable and flexible on GitLab. So,
yeah, but the question becomes about, like, without an inflow of users, like, I think this is GitLab's, like, main folly, is that, like, without an inflow of users, do those features really matter that much? Like, at an enterprise level, maybe it matters, but not really. Like, permission models don't really matter too much at an enterprise level, at least as far as I can, like, realistically see.
And to be fair, GitHub Enterprise slowly catching up. So it's not that GitHub Enterprise is completely staggering. They're increasing the size of the audience bit by bit. Yes. Okay, so the 2 last topics that I have for you folks today. One is cron prompt. So some time ago, we actually needed to implement a product that would be executing periodic jobs, and we gave opportunity for the customers to supply us a cron command, how frequently something need to be executed, and that was an opening for me about how many people actually don't know how cron works, and they absolutely cannot write correct prompts. So someone looks like took a neural network, I would guess, maybe neural network, and wrote a converter that translate a normal English sentence into a cron expression. So the site is cronprompt.com. Out of curiosity, I'm going to type each bloody day. Will it convert to a correct cron? Oh my god, yes. It's actually understood each bloody day, and then yes. So you can, it feels like, yes, there is probably a model with NLP there that capable of converting any prompts to a cron. Not much to say, except people don't know cron, and there is a service like that. I found it quite interesting application of the probably neural networks. I don't know what they're using to implement that. Anyone have anything to say?
I was going to say, like, how do we feel about these types of technologies? Like, crons are a really old type of technology. The syntax for it's really old. I think regex is like in a similar, or like regular expressions are in like a similar boat where it's kind of like an esoteric kind of syntax when we're looking at it. Like, how do we feel about these older type of technologies, and like, should we update them? Like, should we stray away from like the originals to like try to make them more user friendly and more easy to learn in that way?
I've never thought of regex as an esoteric technology. I may be aging myself.
I mean, if you think about it, like a lot of people struggle with that, especially in school. A lot of people struggle with regex when they first start learning it. It's like one of those things where you're like, oh, there's brackets and there's numbers and there's punctuation, but sometimes the punctuation means other things in different contexts. And so it's like one of those things that's like you read a regex for the first time and you're like, I have no idea what this does, but there must be an easier way to do it.
So,
go ahead, Nikita.
Can I ask a question? How much time do you guys spend the first time exiting from Vim? I can tell you a really funny story. It was a DEC Alpha workstation that was my first experience of a proper Unix, so it wasn't like a BSD or Linux. And that was in 93 or something. And yes, somebody say type Vim and then try to exit, and I couldn't. I spent all my 30 minutes.
So you had to learn it.
The text editor.
I guess it is a bit contradictory to talk about like old esoteric technology and then also be a Vim user at the same time. So maybe I'm a bit hypocritical.
But I actually have a life story that's highly connected to what you mentioned, because I had the same thoughts, but on a different context. It's really interesting that you mentioned this. So when Open, what the latest biggest NLP model developed by OpenAPI and sell to Microsoft. GPT-3, yes. Then when GPT-3 as a service was released, and everyone was available to everyone to play with, I wrote a chatbot. Chatbot was working in a very simple way. You would have a transcript because GPT-3 has a limit of the input, so it effectively has a backstory of the characters with a small format, who said what the bot remembers about you, and then they just ask GPT-3 to populate the answer that bot should be answering to you. And then this answer would be appended to the story. If the story becomes too big, I would ask GPT-3 to combine it. Just tell me from this chart what the bot remembers, and then I would put it in the memory. But this requires effectively GPT-3 to learn a pattern, because there should be a tag name, there should be some format. So my chatbot would parse it correctly, would extract response, and would send response to a customer. So effectively, I was asking GPT-3 to learn a small format and to comply with this format, to use special characters in a special place. And in 95% it would be working correctly, and in 5% GPT-3 would put incorrect format, so my parser would fail. So at that point, I replaced parser with also a model that would look on this and just parse it. So here we go. We kind of have a vague protocol of communication that looks like a actual format, but because parser is also a model at this point, you can actually do a typos, you can do a lot of mistakes, and the parser still will understand how to extract reliable information. So in this case, yes, we're still using old technology, we're using a protocol, quote unquote, but it fuzzy logic on both sides. That was quite interesting in the end.
Interesting, a real life technological evolution.
Exactly. yes. And I'm pretty sure that at some point we will apply this technique, because we still live in the world where time to time you might have a corrupted message where you will have a character that doesn't belong there, and suddenly browser no longer can show you the web page. If that would be replaced with a model that just guessing, yeah, you still can render it like pretty simply.
Until it guesses wrong.
Yeah, sure. Like it's also will, but now instead of 5% of errors, like my error rate dropped significantly. I haven't measured new error rate, but it was so negligible that I just never bothered even. Okay. I have the last topic of the day, unless someone wants to say anything. I already. Go ahead.
Just one thing about the cron prompt site you shared. Like I kind of saw this and I was like, how much can I trust that the expression that they're giving me is actually the expression I want them to put out? Because like I can't read cron expressions. Like I have to like check the syntax and everything. But it's nice that just below the expression to have like the expression translated to English. So it suddenly seems like, oh hey, this is like a proper. I can like verify that it's fitting the spirit of what I put in. And like I tried a few different expressions. Not everything actually even resulted in a valid looking translation. Some of them were saying like not a number and whatnot. But it was nice that it told me like here's when you can't trust what I'm outputting.
Yep. I typed once on the Blue Moon and it says me it's on 18th of February. I don't think Blue Moons happens necessarily in 18th of February.
I think Blue Moons are like every 2 weeks almost, if I remember correctly.
Every 2 months.
Right. Maybe.
Blue Moon is the third full moon after 2 full moons. So once in the Blue Moon doesn't seem to be correct. So yes, I don't know. It's interesting that it translated into the expression, but again, I don't want it to execute like judgments on people, right? Pass a sentence based on AI logic alone, even for traffic court.
This is true. But by the way, while you were, I also played with a prompt while you folks were speaking. I put every Lenin's birthday, and I actually correctly put April 22nd, so it's knows when Lenin got born. So
yeah, I also put in a once in a fortnight, but I spelled Fortnite like the game Fortnite, and it automatically it did the right thing.
Okay. So last but not least, I will do a self-PR on our show. Otherwise, why to have a show if we cannot do a self-PR? Article about how to become a PyTorch contributors just published on the official PyTorch Medium. I more or less described how to find an issue, how to find the people whom to help. If you ever want to start contributing to the PyTorch, how to start, how to find what to work on, how to ask help, how to actually find real people, not this bullshit help like, oh, go on forum and ask there, how to find the real people if no one responds on the forum. And how to submit, why we're using different ways submit, not in others. So if you're interested, medium.com/PyTorch, you will find it there. There is nothing special to say about that. But if you're actually going to try it, please send me all your feedback, especially if something doesn't work or something was hard, anything. Not that I will respond, but who knows?
If this was Amazon, the way you get attention to your PR, email Bezos.
Oh, yes. That was an Amazon, yes. Anyway, in Amazon, if someone leaving, sorry, not the someone leaving, in Amazon, Bezos actually was used to review Sub-Zeros himself, like personally. And I know the guy that opened Sub-Zero when he was leaving and said like, bye-bye Bezos in the title and just opened Sub-Zero. Yes. Anyway, that was completely unrelated to the article. And that was the last thing that I brought as a host today. So if you folks want to share anything you want, now is the time. Not everyone at once. Not everyone at once. Please, one by one. But anyway, I think for the first one, it was really nice to resurrect the show. I think it went really, really well. We had quite a few topics. Go ahead.
Eli, Nikita, was like great having both of you on here.
Yeah, it was really fun to be able to contribute. I think like there's a lot of cool topics that we talked about, and like I didn't know the story about the Windows versioning schemes and all that other kind of stuff, and Stripe's versioning as well. I didn't realize that they were keeping so many different things alive. Like, yeah, how do you do that? But
one more thing. This is more of a rumor than a fact, but like I heard there's, you know, why there was no Windows version 9? It's for backward compatibility reasons. It's like there are folks who like when they were trying to like figure out, hey, is this Windows 95 or Windows 97 or like anything before Windows 2000, they would just do OS version dot contains the number 9. And if it does, it would go into compatibility mode and assume, oh, this is one of those really old versions of Windows. And that's why they skipped Windows 9 and went straight from 8 to 10.
Nikita?
is that true?
Is it true?
This is true. So I would want to say that dot contains was not the thing, right? So like JavaScript was in the nascence, and I don't think string contains existed in HTML4. I might be wrong. It was a while back, but yes, it was string concurrency when they like said Windows 9, and they want to distinguish it for Windows 3.11, I think. At this point.
You know, actually, funnily enough, we kind of went through a similar thing within PyTorch as well for versioning when we upgraded to 1.10, and we had everybody comparing against like that kind of version scheme, and we were worried about people doing comparisons against 1.10, and you know, with a string, I think it's like 1.10 is like less than 1.9 in that case. Like if you do a string comparison of it, and we had to write a special version class in order to do the comparisons and have it do the thing that people expect it to do.
Yes, I also remember a lot of our packaging script assumes that the major is a single digit, not a number, right? So we have 1.1 rather than 1.10, right?
Yeah.
It was like, who want to do split of dots? You just say like :3, and that's your major and minor.
Versioning's hard, man. Versioning's super hard. I mean, besides picking a name for projects, I feel like versioning is like one of the next hardest problems.
I think LaTeX have the best version.
Who?
You know what they do? They added digit from a pi. So the version 3 is and 3.1, 3.14, and so on and so forth.
Who is this?
LaTeX, the old packaging software.
Jesus.
Wow.
That's remind me a little bit of something Pi specifically, totally unrelated to this thing, but since we're still rolling, I opened the articles about Windows 9 and why it skipped while we were discussing that. Notice how much ads I have, like that was randomly popping up, and realized that somehow I switched off my Pi hole, which is DNS, I blocking all the ads on the DNS level in house, and yes, went and re-switched it off, and somehow this particular site that I found the news about Windows 9, it bypassing at least half of the ads that are bypassing Pi-hole. Anyway, completely unrelated, but if you folks have any suggestions how to block house-wide ads except the DNS route, let me know.
Use Wikipedia, no ads.
Right, yes.
Only ads are from Wikipedia themselves.
Oh, yes.
True.
Yes.
When they bother you with that giant yellow banner asking you to donate.
Give us money.
It works.
It works. I donated.
Yeah.
Same.
Same, yes. Okay, folks, one last thing. Who would volunteer to be the next host? I remind you that the only thing for the host is just come up with a topic enough to speak for the half an hour, but we all will be discussing everything, but the host still need to come up with the news. So who want to volunteer for the next episode? Not everyone at once. you folks are so active today. Okay, we can take it offline.
I was saying, like, if neither of you two want to do it, I can do it. But I wanted to let you both, or either of you have the option to do it first.
I think I want to see a pro do it first. So
Exactly.
I'll let you go, and then we'll talk about doing it later on.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, and you folks who are listening to us or watching on the YouTube, you always can propose your topics in the comments. We might even read it. And yes, we might even discuss it next time. So yes, with that, thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Okay,
That's really funny.
we're still live on the YouTube, but the recording is over. But we're still live on the YouTube because we always have a post show at least to say something. I don't know what. Let me actually see if there was any comments. Oh, there was one like. There is someone still watching even after the end, and there was no comments, which is absolutely okay because we have not advertised anywhere.
What is your YouTube channel?
YouTube channel. Let me send the YouTube channel. I will send it
We don't have
in
an Nonintuitive Bits channel.
this one. This one. Ooh, it still says live with this nice live something. Yeah. Anyway. Okay.
All right. See you folks next week.
Yeah. See you folks next week. Bye.
See ya.